Hello all. We have come up with our next session of Blocktical on financing climate action using blockchain. And the person we are meeting here today has done his engineering in biotechnology and master's in environmental science, policy and management. He was co-founder at Trip Benefit and was part of founding team at Water Hubs, which is into providing integrated water and sanitary infrastructure solution for urban slums. He also worked with Asian Development Bank and Chalmers University of Technology as a consultant on various consultancy projects. He was director at SD Ventures, which is a climate finance venture, and also founding member of CUES Foundation, which is into enabling the adoption of low carbon technologies in building sector. And currently he's a co-founder of OffsetFarm, which is into financing climate action using blockchain. So we are very pleased to have him today at Blocktical. So let's welcome Saurabh Saraf. Hi, Saurabh. How are
Hi,
you?
Sharvari. Hi, I'm fine, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we will start. Just want to know that you are currently working, you are currently co-founder at OffsetFarm. So can you please elaborate regarding sustainable development goals in a brief?
Sure. So sustainable development goals are essentially 17 broad goals, which were which were designed by the United Nations and have been active since 2015, and will be active for basically the next 8 years. So from 2015 to 2030, these are 17 broad goals on basically various facets of sustainability, of good life, quality living, uh, and touch various social, environmental, and developmental aspects of living. And yeah, so that is what SDGs are. They were a result of something which was previously called the MDGs, or Millennium Development Goals, that were active from 2001 to 2050, and the SDGs essentially replaced them. So yeah, with our venture at OffsetFarm, we are also looking at addressing some of these SDGs through the project we enable financing for. And yeah, I'll be very happy to share further on what we do, how it impacts the SDGs concern.
Yeah. So though I have introduced you in the beginning regarding your past experiences and past ventures, can you tell me in a brief about your journey to OffsetFarm? Basically, what was the motivation behind setting up OffsetFarm?
Sure. So Sharvari, I've spent my entire professional career in the clean tech sector, uh, and have had the opportunity to work with different kinds of technologies or domains in clean tech. I worked in water, wastewater, renewable energy, general sustainability consulting, and also financing. Uh, Long story short, I moved to India after some 8 years away in Europe by the late end of 2020. And uh, at that time, me along with my co-founder, Ankit Mathur, uh, we used to discuss opportunities in the clean tech sector, that what we can do to essentially address a certain problem or create some valuable enterprise out of it. Uh, in 2020 beginning, when I was in Sweden, we both saw some opportunity coming in the carbon credit market, the carbon markets. Um, we both had started our careers in the carbon sector, in the carbon markets, when something called CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, which was a UN designated cap and trade system for the world, to essentially trade carbon allowances or carbon credits, CERs as we know them. So we both had exposure to it some like 12 years back, 13 years back. And like in 2020, we saw some very strong demands for carbon credits in the voluntary market. So I'd just like to highlight that uh, there is a voluntary market in carbon, and then there is a compliance market in carbon. Compliance market is when a government or a group of governments or some kind of a regional government within a country may set some boundaries for its market participants, economic participants, to sort of uh, have some kind of emission limits in their actions. And if they are not able to meet those limits, then they need to buy an allowance or a carbon credit. So that is a compliance driven market where some sort of a government regulatory control is there. And if they don't do this, then there is a penalty. In the voluntary market, where OffsetFarm is currently working on and is focused on for the time being, um, the demand for carbon credit is voluntary, which is it is primarily driven by large corporations who have public commitments to being net zero in their emissions, uh, to reflect their climate stewardship, climate consciousness, to be responsive to their shareholders' request for being a climate friendly company, etc. So these sort of companies uh, commit to going net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050, depending on the company, sector, etc., etc. And these are the companies who then look for buying carbon credits, carbon offsets, they are called synonymously, to basically offset their carbon emissions. So, in the voluntary market, therefore, these companies essentially drive the demand. And I also shared that the demand is basically driven by their commitments, voluntary commitments in public. So this is now coming back to your initial question, the reason behind OffsetFarm and how it happened. 2020, we saw a great demand for credits. That demand we still see as we speak, like more demand than supply, basically. Uh, and we decided to basically try to tap this demand through a venture. Now we started doing projects or developing projects of our own, uh, which so these are the projects which typically produce carbon credits and were in a certain sector. So as I said, my co-founder Ankit, he's had a long-standing experience in the also in the environmental green tech space. He's led a company called Greenway, which is one of India's largest manufacturer of clean cook stoves, um, uh, which he runs today. And so his clean cook stove essentially reduce the consumption of firewood at a household level for those households which use those cook stoves to cook, basically. If they won't use those cook stoves, then they're using the traditional, as we call it, mitti ka chula, freestone fires, etc., which are very, very energy inefficient. So, and he had, so as I was saying that Ankit, having had, this experience and being a co-founder at Greenway, through him, we started developing clean cooking oriented projects because there was a strong knowledge in the clean cooking sector of the supply chains of the customers and also of the products. So manufacturing was there. And in doing these projects, we realized that while we knew very well how to develop projects, how to implement them, get issuances of carbon credits, but one fill in the blanks which was not solved was financing. And this financing is very crucial because if there'll be no finance, how will the project be implemented? There has to be some level of debt equity that makes a project happen. These are big projects, require big money. And that is when we started exploring structures on how we could basically get project financing for projects which generate carbon credits. Um, Unfortunately, conventional lenders don't view carbon credits as an asset class that they would lend on, generally speaking. So an SBI or HDFC Bank or ICICI Bank, for example,
So,
would
but
consider
so you
carbon
sorry
credit.
to interrupt you. So this experience is only in India specifically you're talking about, or the same experience outside India also?
But I think it's general. Carbon credits has been a
Gen.
volatile sector, you
Okay.
know. So so there is less of a price stability comparing other commodities,
Okay.
which we are comfortable with, oil,
Okay.
metals, agri commodities, chemicals. So this
Okay.
is still,
General.
it's becoming an asset class.
Okay.
And so with Offset Farm, we're trying to solve this problem to basically get project developers money to implement projects. Uh, if they don't implement projects, there'll be no carbon credits. And and this is how with Offset Farm we are structuring this offering so that a project developer can get money to implement projects. uh, the investor can get in return their carbon credits. Uh, it is, we offer price stability and risk management to the investor because we only allow those projects which have gone through certain rigor of a carbon standard or certification and which we have vetted thoroughly ourselves. And to the project developer, we provide certainty of uh, cash flows that we need to essentially implement what we are doing. And to do this through a transaction layer on blockchain, which is essentially for making things transparent, quick, and I should also say accessible uh, for any kind of investor. So this is what Offset Farm has started to sort of cater. Yeah,
Okay. So what kind of carbon offset projects like uh, are there?
sure, sure. So I can tell in our portfolio, which we are building at Offset Farm, we have projects in the clean cooking sector. So where, as I said, we target rural households primarily that are traditionally cooking on the chulas that we know about, and there we replace them with a well-designed product, highly thermally efficient, that you know uses less of energy to produce the same output of cooking, and therefore drastically reduces the need of firewood. So that is one type of project that we have. We're looking at a project for farmers, wherein the farmers can get so around 50% of arable land in India uh, is not connected with managed irrigation. So it's rain irrigated, which basically means farmers are at the mercy of rains. If they come, great. If not, then it's a problem. So therefore, we have all these infrastructure of canals, of irrigation pipelines, etc., pumps that are set. So with this project, we are looking at deploying solar pumps, very conventional technology, but it has a lot of benefit environmental as well as social, because now the farmer can basically use solar energy to get a pump working to irrigate their fields. They, in doing so, they do not use grid connected power, which is coal dominated in India, or diesel generators, which is very polluting also. Uh, they get irrigation on their fields, which help them basically maintain their incomes and perhaps increase their incomes, and so that they are more resilient towards weather-related um, or other exogenous issues in related to climate that may affect their yields. So this is another kind of project. We are also evaluating projects in the forestry space in the Northeast, where we are looking at uh, essentially conservation efforts to, to reduce deforestation and avoiding loss of forest cover, which could be avoided by some management. So this is an exercise which is also producing carbon credits. We're looking at that. So, and we're also looking at waste-oriented projects. So I'm also giving you a flavor of what kind of projects are sort of generating carbon credits, also in general. I mean, not just us, there are others who are also doing it. Uh, so waste-oriented projects would mean, let's say there's a landfill in which there's a lot of waste, legacy waste for many years, and that waste needs to be sorted, needs to be managed so that it doesn't produce methane by anaerobic digestion. So how do you do that? You sort the waste, you take the valuable waste out, you ensure that anaerobic conditions do not arise. If at all there's methane trapped, then it is flared, it is used properly, etc. For example, then in sugar mills, so I reckon you're in Pune, so Maharashtra, for example, have a lot of these sugar mills and sugarcane farming. So sugar mills have, when they extract the sugarcane juice, then the waste that is remaining, the biomass, it's called bagasse. And it is very useful for various things.
Right.
So you can generate power from it, you can generate heat from it, and the same power and heat could be used in the system. There, uh, when you use the sugarcane juice, thus extracted to kind of take sugar out by crystallizing it, then the froth that remains, that can also be used in anaerobic digestion to create methane, which can then be used to run a gas engine, produce power. Or that waste, which I originally told you about, the gas, it can be used to make boards. So there are so many possibilities which we can do with different kinds of waste. Also, just giving you a flavor of the kind of projects.
Right.
I told you about clean cooking. I told you about forestry or reduced
Yeah.
deforestation. I told you about waste-oriented projects. I told you about these solar pump, agri-oriented
Right.
projects. So
Right.
there are varieties. We are dealing in some. There are others who are dealing in others. Yeah.
Okay. So you have explained about this earlier, but still I want to ask this question. Why did you choose blockchain technology specifically for financing climate action at OffsetFarm?
Right, right. So, so the use of blockchain in the tech stack was for us. If I were to be honest with you, we started. So this is like early 2021. So just before the second wave of COVID that we had in the country, let's say in the beginning of Feb, to that we started understanding that we need a way of funding projects, financing projects, and not depending on conventional lenders for the same. So why blockchain? So our thesis was that the crypto world, now I'm talking almost 1.5 years back, right?
Right.
So crypto world is relatively more open uh, to try experiment than conventional uh, financial
Right.
lenders or financial participants. So they are open for new products. And at that time, we started with the assumption that we can actually tap a lot of this value which is locked in DAOs and in these tokens, Ether, Bitcoin, etc., to give the crypto natives a feel of a real world asset, which is a carbon credit, and which is an asset that is produced by having a substantial impact on the grassroots. So you can't just have carbon credits out of nowhere. The project has to go through a lot of checks and balances in order to sorry, in order to yield these carbon credits. So this was our starting assumption that we will tap these resources. This was on the finance front. On the tech front, still blockchain was very useful on 2, 3 fronts, and I tell you, and that use case is still very relevant for us. So since it's a ledger, a data ledger, it's basically recording data on chain, and that chain is immutable. You can't fudge it once the data is recorded. In carbon markets, information asymmetry or lack of transparency thereof has been a legacy problem Look, how it affects a participant is a project developer has no access to data on the price of carbon or direct access to the buyers. So they are dependent on intermediaries who do the market making for them on either side. In doing the market making, the developer doesn't know. The ultimate buyer or the offsetter doesn't know the right value or the right information because there's an asymmetry there. So it could be that intermediaries essentially take off a lot of value that could have lied with project developers. So this was at least a problem back then. I mean, things have changed very rapidly in the sector also. I can't say that same problem is there today. But so with blockchain, at any point, if a transaction happens from our platform, from investor A to project A, that is basically recorded that this transaction has happened of this value. So there is clear-cut price transparency. We're not hiding anything from the buyer or from the seller. It's there. One. So basically so that the market participants have more confidence in us that we have like one asymmetry here. So it's out there. One second, the use of so I'm right now talking about just using it as a data ledger. But then if you think from a smart contract perspective, you're basically trying to automate or make efficient certain processes which are very inefficient otherwise. So in the smart contract, at least in our product, when an investor buys carbon credits, future carbon credits from the project, then what happens? An NFT is issued. This NFT is representing a contract between the buyer and the seller. The contract has some rights and responsibilities. What are those rights and responsibilities? To make it, to summarize this, it's basically saying that I have given you XYZ dollars, and you give me XYZ credits every year for N number of years, and that's a contract. So now, this is a contract which is there. The transaction that has happened, NFT is issued, the buyer gets the NFT. Now, whenever there is a real carbon credit issuance from the project, the buyer of this NFT is actually the owner of that carbon credit, right? Now, as soon as that is issued, certain sort of entries are made in the system that we have at the backend based on the information that we get from so-called registries or carbon registries, as they are called, that, yeah, this issuance has happened. And as soon as we put that information, the smart contract is essentially activated. The buyer gets an option to collect those offsets automatically. Now, the buyer gets the option to collect those offsets in the form of tokens. At least that's how we conceptualized it then, since you were asking why blockchain. So at any time, the buyer has access to the real carbon credit and the token. And at any point, they can burn the token and get the real carbon credit into their registry. So registry is like a wallet, let's say, for carbon credits from registry A to registry B, like a DMAT account A to DMAT account B, something like that. So at any point, they can just click a button, get the credit. If they want to offset their emissions, they can just click a button, retire. And things happen more or less automatically. And carbon is retired at the back end in the registry. So we're using smart contract to try to make the system trustless, so to say, in the sense that things happen automatically, no intervention.
Without intervention.
Without intervention, it's there, transparent. This is what will happen if you do this. If you click a button, this will happen. If you click that button, this will happen. Now, whatever I said, to do this in real world is not that easy. So I'm just also abstracting it now when I'm talking about it. It takes a lot of manual work. Yeah. In this case, also, it will take some manual work. The industry is not prepared to go completely trustless. But so this is another use of blockchain, automating it, the transactions, making it transparent. And the last thing is, since these projects are pretty sizable in terms of the investments that they need. So if a project is issuing, let's say, 5 million carbon credits in its life, which could be 10 years, then we are looking at, we can be looking at, depending on the project type, a capex in like 6, 7, oh, sorry, a capex in around 15, 16, 17 million dollars, maybe. And yeah, and so that money is basically what is needed to deploy, to monitor the project, to collect data, ensure that it's going well. Now, this kind of money cannot be invested in by you and me as individuals. This is big money. How do we make it in a way that you and me can also invest? We can fractionalize it. Just like a company is fractionalize our shares. Right. So we fractionalize the future credits into pieces from one project.
Right.
So now, which was like $50 million worth of project or more, I can buy it for $10,000, $1,000, $5,000. So this is the use of blockchain.
Fractional ownership.
Fractional ownership. That, and you can also call it to make this accessible to basically retailers, to smaller size investors, mid-size investors.
Right.
So there are some investors who may just want to experiment with carbon credit. Now, what is this carbon credit? Okay, I have this much money, let's try. Right?
Right.
Now you make that thing accessible.
Right.
So this is our reason.
Okay. And you have named these tokens, right?
Yeah.
The NFT which you have said regarding ownership of the project will be given to the investor. So there are certain names for these tokens.
Right.
Can
So
you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So the NFT, which is a contract of investment and a contract of paying back the carbon credits, we call it a sprout. So sprout NFT. The sprout is a seedling that grows and later on yield fruits and flowers.
Right.
So that is the symbolism there. That the sprout will.
That's a nice name, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really like that when I heard about it. It suits the offset farm and the whatever the purpose behind it.
Absolutely. So we spent a lot of thinking around naming it. Later on, we realized that there's some sprout token here and there, but we were like, let it be.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the offset is the offset token. Yeah.
And those tokens are, I mean, investor will get the ownership with sprout tokens, right? And then they will get offset tokens over the period of the project.
Yes.
For the carbon offsets.
That's right.
Right. So regarding onboarding these carbon offset projects, what is the procedure or how do you evaluate before onboarding them at OffsetFarm?
Sure. So first consideration is that any project should be registered with a carbon standard. There are certain standards in the market which are accepted by market participants. To name a few: Gold Standard, BERA, ACR, American Carbon Registry, CAR, Climate Action Reserve. And these are standards which, what do? They give credibility to a carbon credit, that this is gold standard certified carbon credit. And what is the meaning of this phrase that I just said? It basically means that when a project is registered under gold standard or VERA or whichever carbon standard, then they have to follow certain methodological guidance provided by these standards on how should the project be designed, how should the credit calculations be done, what are the checks and balances, uh, how will you monitor the project in its lifetime, what definition of what will you monitor, the parameters. So it provides guidance, essentially, checks and balances uh, that make the project already of a basic minimum quality to be onboarded. Right? Not many can actually even do that. So we only accept projects that are registered or are going to be registered under a certain standard. That is one. Second, we accept projects where the issuance of carbon credits are at least of certain volumes, which will make sense for them to be financed. So if the carbon credit issuance is like 4,000-5,000, then it, and I'm just blurting numbers, but everything has some context here. But so that if it's very small in the sense that the effort that it takes to register a project, monitor a project, that doesn't sort of the reward doesn't pay back. The credit, it's like small. So that kind of project is definitely not interesting. So it
Right.
has to be of a certain size to be
Okay.
on the platform. So that
Okay.
is second, the scale. And third is the sector. So we have preferences towards certain sectors. A, on which we are good at, and B, what market demands. So we see certain demands for certain types of projects, like let's say community projects. There is a good demand because apart from the climate impact, there's a lot of social impact there on SDGs. In forestry projects, there's a good demand because nature-based sequestration projects are very are highly valued by carbon investors. So yeah, these three very broad things on how we go about onboarding
Okay.
projects. Yeah.
Okay. So, and also, are you getting benefited by any government grants?
No,
Or
it's a complete no. There's no subsidy grant. Neither do we design, neither do we want.
since it's related to climate change, climate
No,
action, that
yeah, but it's market oriented. We can.
no.
So what, in fact, if a government has to help or some public body has to help, they can actually come in. I mean, to basically uh, increase capacity building for project developers, which basically means education, one, on how to get the benefit of carbon credits in their projects and whether it makes sense or not for certain project types. So that is one. Second, uh, to help them manage projects better
Right.
and do MRVs in the right way. MRV is monitoring, reporting, verification. So
Okay.
MRV is, I'd say, the soul of such projects. If you can't monitor your progress and communicate it, report it, and get it verified, will not get carbon credit.
Right.
So, and we see that project developers do need help also on this. So
Right.
capacity building is something which public bodies or those who work on public good, etc., can do. At RM, we are looking at it as a venture, as a proper finance venture,
Fine.
to meet a need that is there in the market, and trying to do basically what we think we are the best at in developing projects and structuring finance for them, in helping them get access to buyers, and then using the transaction layer of tech that includes blockchain to make all this transparent and efficient.
Right. And what's your roadmap ahead? I mean, journey ahead with OffsetFarm.
Yeah, sure. So what? So right now what we have done is what we want to do through tech, we have done it, or we are doing it manually right now. So, which means structuring a deal between one buyer, big buyer, and one big project. So, so this is what we've been doing, helping projects and project developers with tools, with guidance, and again, our expertise is in structuring this financing between a buyer and a seller. So that is something that we are anyways doing. We are building the tech around doing the same thing in a more efficient way. So that right now we are selling a project to a buyer. Tomorrow we will sell a project to thousands of buyers at the same time, quickly. So that our project developers get their financing quickly. So the roadmap then is that in, let's say, by this year's end, November somewhere, we intend to launch with our tech product. And we have a few portfolio projects that we can raise for when we go all out with the tech. And that's what we basically then take it from there. At least the very short-term immediate roadmap is this.
Okay. So actually, great to know about OffsetFarm. Actually, I read your story about OffsetFarm, and that's why I got connected to you. I'm also exploring blockchain currently, and I have heard about use cases in supply chain, healthcare, agriculture, but I was not aware of financing climate action using blockchain. And when I read that story, when I read that article at your story, I got intrigued about this. And that's why I contacted with you and wanted to have a session with you regarding this, because there are a lot of things are happening in blockchain space, but mainly the focus which is currently even at World Economic Forum, the main focus is on SDGs always. So and climate action is one of the goals in SDGs. So I just wanted to have a session with you regarding that. So thanks for today's session. It's great to have a session with you. And for Blocktical viewers, please subscribe to our channel, like it, share it. And there is one more use case of blockchain today we have explored. And thanks, Saurabh, for taking out your time and having session with us.
Most welcome, Sharvari. All the very best.
Yeah, thanks. We'll keep in touch. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we finished session within time.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.